Welcome back. You're watching Morning Express, and we're taking a look at what's making headlines in the papers, both locally and internationally. We've already covered the international papers, and we're taking a look at what's making headlines in the local dailies, and they're leading this morning with politics, and more politics. The front page of the Standard tells us DP Ruto pain over Uhuru NASA plan, while the Daily Nation is leading with collapse of tyranny of numbers. And of course, we all know what tyranny of numbers means, and we have already talked about that. We were on the subject of Jimmy Wanjigi throwing his hat in the ring. I'll not be a kingmaker again come the next polls. This is what he said, strongly hinting that he may join the race to succeed President Uhuru Kenyatta come 2022. And in studio with me is Jimmy Kagoni, who is a political analyst, as well as Stephen Mwakesi, who is a public policy analyst, and Sakwa Bunyasi, who is the Member of Parliament for Nambale constituency. Gentlemen, we were on the part where we were expecting now Mr. Mwakesi's take on this one. Mr. Mwakesi, over to you. What do you make of Jimmy Wanjigi's news that he shall be getting into the race and trying to vie as opposed to supporting any candidate this time round?
Well, Trix, the entry of Jimmy Wanjigi into the political mix of 2022 is quite an interesting one. He's been a perennial supporter of politics since a long time ago. He comes from a family of politicians. His dad was a former MP. And so it was not unexpected to hear him speak in such terms that he'd be interested to run for president come 2022. Of course, what he brings to the table, considering that aside from his wealth, is the fact that he's also from Murang'a County, a county that has been very synonymous with politics of the day, and especially funding of such political endeavors. And for me, when I see that his entrance into the race is coming at this particular juncture, it's a culmination of the efforts that he has done previously.
Yes.
And I know, considering that the president has been very clear in his mind that the presidency should move away from the traditional tribes of Kalenjin and Kikuyu, then him propping himself up at this particular moment in time would most definitely, in my view, be looking toward pitching for a deputy president position. And considering that many of the candidates that we are looking at come 2022 to be propped up, few of them have the kind of monetary weight that Maina Wanjigi might bring to the table, Jimmy Wanjigi might bring to the table. And so you would then require somebody of this kind of fluidity in an election cycle to be your deputy or running mate going forward. So I find that a lot of people within the political scene might welcome his entry into politics. For me, it also would be an interesting one because in some way or form, it does make the people who have been contending for the throne, Uhuru Kenyatta's throne, a bit more worried than they were before. When you look at that particular list, only few of them feature when it comes to having the kind of monetary weight that would be required to be able to take the mantle that Uhuru Kenyatta currently possesses. Okay. So I think it will be an interesting one. I'm very much watching.
Were you surprised by it?
I wasn't surprised, completely not surprised. For me, it was just a question of asking myself, is this madness or genius? And it's a line in between, but I still believe that he is trying to make sure that come 2022, he's not left into the abyss of irrelevance because following 2017, he was quite hard hit and his name dragged through the mud. And we never saw him feature through the handshake, honeymoon period, and even to this particular juncture now. So it's good that we are now hearing the name coming back again, and this time as a contender and not as a kingmaker. A very bold statement. Let's see what he will bring to the table and how he'll bring an interesting mix to the politics of 2022.
Yes, but far from what you've alluded to, his monetary clout, do you think he has the trimmings of what Honorable Bunyasi Sakwa has termed as a leading candidate from Central?
This will all depend on the kind of work he puts in from this moment on. He would need to really show that he's more than just a person who calls people to his home and forms governments with them. He needs to now show that he can be a leader of the people, and also connect to the electorate that has been moving hurriedly towards a hustler dynamic. So if he can actually show that he can be one that can help his people and lead them towards the next election, then he will definitely be able to get that particular crown. And Murang'a has been playing a very central role in this crowning game, because as you can see, Speaker Muturi, where he was crowned, was in Murang'a. The shrines were in Murang'a, and Mwangi wa Iria has done all manner of things to show that he himself can also be a contender to inherit from Uhuru Kenyatta. So it's something that it's very important to watch going forward, and I wish him all the best.
All right, now let's take a look at page 4. As I told you, we're talking about this crying shame, as the Standard has put it this morning, how onions from China are feeding Kenyans. And the Standard Checkpoint has given us a breakdown that is on page 4 of these numbers. And let's just take a look at that and see what we can learn about how the country is faring on, and when it comes to trade, especially of some things that are, staples in our cooking. We cannot do without onions, but of course they're not coming from inside Kenya. They're coming from outside. They have 60% is the levy charge on onions, garlic and related produce imported into Kenya in the 12 months of July to 12 months to July 2021. What Kenya's bought from China now in 2019. According to this graphics, we are told processed fish to the point of, or rather to the valued at 1.6 billion shillings. We have sauces and seasonings, 173.3 million shillings worth. Rice, 599.2 million shillings. Yeast, 141.2 million shillings. Onions, 524.3 million shillings. Hard liquor, 126.3 million shillings. Processed tomatoes, 271.8 million shillings worth. Cinnamon, 75.3 million shillings. Other sugars, 202.2 million shillings. And vegetable saps. Onion imports between China and Tanzania have been put side by side so that you can make a comparison, because there has been an outcry about the imports from Tanzania, but apparently when you look at this graph, it indicates that China is a major supplier as opposed to neighboring Tanzania. And when you come to other countries are also involved in this, we have India giving us 6.3% of the imports, onion imports, 4.3% Egypt, 2% Rwanda, Tanzania 1.9%, 84% China. And there's more details coming out on page 4 of the Standard. Honorable Sakwa Binyasi, you are an economist. Perhaps you can help us understand why this would be happening in a country with such fertile soils and so many people looking for jobs. I mean, we could make our own onions, couldn't we? Or rather plant.
Absolutely. Let me take the generous view, and then I'll take a critical view also.
Yes, yes.
The generous view is that when commodities are produced at a level at which production cost plus transport takes you to the next market, you're likely to do that. It's likely to move. So it is, I think, the case that in China, the productivity rates of onions, the amount of onions you can produce per unit area is high. And so they can move it in bulk, for sure, overseas, and then land on our shores and distribute to them.
But that would mean they're finding a ready, willing, untapped market.
That's the point. That's the point. That they feel that they probably feel also that they can push out current producers because they're barely managing. They are trading in small quantities. The transportation arrangements, the bulking and selling arrangements are such that they feel they can probably outcompete them easily because they have slightly more sophisticated retailing and so on. Not a little more, a lot more sophisticated retailing. The only reason why China is not selling everything they produce to every country in the world are restrictions that are either administrative, phytosanitary, where the health requirements, you can play around with the way how you define the health requirements so that goods don't enter. That's one reason, for example, that the U.S. uses vis-a-vis Mexico, vis-a-vis China. They would say that the way the kind of fertilizer you use, the kind of pest management you use is not acceptable. So you get a way in which you can hold out the goods or just close the market like the Japanese do with rice. The exports of rice into Japan was high-octane politics for a long time, and only a little bit goes in. But now ours, I think we have gone into WTO, the World Trade Organization arrangements, which govern trade across countries. In a lock, stock, and barrel, we have agreed a sense that we are playing a game, but others are not playing the same. We're playing a nice game, they're not playing a nice game. The markets here have also been opened up as part of the agreements in the bilateral trade with China. And as you know, our bilateral trade with China is not all above, we don't know all of it. A lot of it is in documents that have not been shared. For example, around the SGR, we haven't seen the full SGR documentation. And there was a mention that the commodities were part of the package, which commodities had not been clearly specified, which means that we would have an opportunity, to sell oil, like in our case, to China, and would accept also some of their commodities to come in. I don't know if this is part of that.
Yeah, but
if it is not that,
Honorable Bunyasi, one would hope, and I'm not saying the trade with China is bad, it's actually very good. My question is, why not trade on things that actually capitalize on agriculture here and supply our own and even export, and then trade on things that we don't yet have the capacity to produce? I strongly believe that things like onions, and given our seashores and how much marine life we have, we can actually even do fish for ourselves. Why not make those agreements in a way that we are taking in things that we are absolutely unable to get? Yes,
I think one lesson we get from this is that if we manage our trade chains, internal trade chains, export trade chains, we can increase the range of goods we can sell. You help farmers perhaps work in groups so that they can transport in bulk and perhaps export in bulk as well, that you meet the international health standards as are required when trade in foods moves across countries. That we could probably do more. We can, of course, begin by selling to our neighbors, and we shall move on and sell to China itself, perhaps, someday. I do not think that we in this country have taken much trouble to, it is in the goals of the Agenda 4 as well as the 2030 vision, food security and so on, both in terms of domestic and promotion of exports, which will also include food products, and it could be any range of things where there is a shortfall globally and then you can go in and fill the void. I don't think that our traders, our exporters have focused yet on goods like those, but I'm sure in due course they'll probably begin to focus and therefore move back to the farmer, get great aggregation, move it to the market, and probably get better transportation, move it to neighboring countries. China can feed literally the amount they produce, literally the whole world, literally. But others have been concerned about the safety issues, and I think that is something we should begin to focus on. You remember with fish, there were issues about the fish feed regime they might have been using because people found that the fish from China had certain characteristics that they felt were probably not safe. People felt that the fish had components that looked like plastic, as it were. But all these were related to feed regimes. Now, the question there, of course, is what our own KEBS, what Kenya Bureau of Standards does, as well as our ChemFis does, because they are the ones that are supposed to protect us, protect both for food safety as well as the reduction of movement of pests in commodities across countries and so on. They better come out in the open and tell us. As it turns out, the fish indeed had been fed on diets that were probably not approved and so on. And those are issues that I think in Kenya, apart from demonstrating that, we should allow a public debate on it.
Yes.
So it's not about that country, it's about food
us.
safety and ourselves.
Yes, yes.
Even what we do ourselves, like
Absolutely.
you know how people treat vegetables here. You spray them a few days before they look nice and shiny and so on. That has been done elsewhere, it's been discouraged.
Yeah.
So I think the Chinese trade, we should expect to see a lot more than we have seen. They virtually produce everything you can think about.
They're termed the world's manufacturers, which is quite true. And Mr. Kagoni, what do you make of this one?
I want to pick it from where Mheshimiwa has left and maybe highlight two things.
Yes.
That for the longest, our economy has remained an import economy, and it was really inclined to the West and mainly to the sectors like the technological sectors and other areas. Rarely did we see the penetration of foodstuff, for instance, the items that we are talking about, onions, fish, rice, and everything else, and now we have moved to that. Now, I think for the past around 10 to 15 years, we have seen ourselves trading a lot with the East, the China, the Japan, and many other countries from Asia. We have seen ourselves trading a lot from that side. And it appears that now the penetration has now really changed, or rather their strategy to really take advantage of the market that is there in Kenya and in Africa at large. They are really now changing from just competing from the sectors, traditional sectors that the West had actually taken advantage of.
Yes.
And they're introducing new components and new items and trying to see what can happen. Now, on our end, we have done very little. In fact, I think we really enjoyed the monopoly of the local market that was there, and you really hear that we are even trying to take any advantage to see on the kind of exports we can start to create around some of the items that have actually been highlighted here. In fact, I think our competition has just been with the neighboring countries, the Tanzania, the Uganda, in items around food stuff and that kind of a thing. The truth of the matter is that if we are not very careful and are very strategic, these are markets that are really going to be dominated by the West. And I want to agree with Mheshimiwa, first of all, because we really need to check from the policy angle. Are we having a loophole around the policy and the way we deal with the bilateral talks? And the truth of the matter is that there is very little disclosure that is actually even made when it comes to some of these bilateral talks. In fact, we just see the exchange
happening. And I'd like Mr. Mwakesi to briefly touch on this one because we're running out of time. Do you think the Big Four agenda is the answer to this? Because at the end of the day, we do need to protect our farmers, but at the same time, there's nothing wrong with trading with other countries. So will the Big Four agenda help us achieve a sort of balance when it comes to these things?
Trix, if you're going to use Big Four to really try and make sure that produce such as onions and tomatoes make it to our table without necessarily having resorting to imports, then you'd have to really work on ensuring that the farmer and the cost of production for the farmer is at its utmost lowest.
Yes.
Because I'm a tomato and an onion farmer in Taveta, and I can tell you the cost of inputs, one, if you even look at irrigation supplies, pumps and everything, pipes, it's quite exorbitant. And we know, I personally also purchase my fertilizer and my insecticides and herbicides from Tanzania, because it's much cheaper than what you get from stores here in Kenya. Then the cost of transportation is crazy, and by the time it gets to market, the price cannot be able to compete. Now, when you look at the price of onion, and I can talk of numbers that have been for the past 3 months, they have gone up as high as even 60 to 70 shillings per kilo. And probably the people who are bringing in the onions from China are more predictable in terms of what is the landed cost, at what price they were able to give to an aggregator or somebody who's able to make an inroad into the retail space at a particular determined price. So this is something that makes every local producer to be beaten at every single point, and an importer will always make money because they're able to guarantee their customers a guaranteed price point. So for the government, I think it's very important that we really begin focusing on how do we make our farmers become the cost of production to be much lower, and also how we can also get as many farmers as possible to be able to farm on one particular crop, and be able to ensure that we are using techniques that have come out of credible research and making sure that the cost of production is at a very low price point. And also the cost of transport is also a very big thing, because when you look at the challenges that an onion coming from China has to go through, it has to go through import duty, it has to go through transport, so many other things, and at the time it reaches in Nairobi, it's able to compete with onions being produced in Athi River.
Can you imagine
and even beat that? Then it means
Nairobi
there is something we
and
need
to
to
the
do.
markets and onto your table.
Exactly.
I mean,
We need
imagine that journey.
That value chain, we need to really assess it and make sure that we can be able to ensure that we get prices at the table to be much lower and comfortable to the consumer.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Did you have something to add?
I was going to add something, maybe a slight complication in a sense.
Yes.
That what Kenya also should look out through the WTO, within the WTO rules, is the extent to which Chinese agricultural produce has state assistance. You know, their systems are highly organized but also socialized.
Yes.
So these are the rules that the international community has to look at carefully. Is there anything along their value chain, not just for tomatoes, or rather, as it is onions, is there anything that has a component of government subsidy in fertilizer, provision in any aspect of production where state assistance is embedded? I think we need to look at that so that the rules of the game are fairer, because that has been a problem elsewhere, a big problem.
Do you think we should borrow some of these elements?
Sorry,
would it work for us if we borrowed some of their approaches to agriculture?
Yes, I mean, the people, our farmers, and my colleague here is a farmer, says, our farmers have complained of the lack of state assistance.
Yes.
How does the state assist? Good roads would help, transportation arrangements, organized producer groups can move in bulk, tighter standards in transportation, in storage, in handling, can protect our farmers. We must find ways in which we protect our farmers. Of course, if the protection levels are very high, you raise prices for the domestic consumer. In fact, if you are looking at the interest of the domestic consumer, you can say open the markets and let the cheapest thing come in from anywhere. But that's not how we do it, because this production and trade is what creates jobs, is what provides incomes to our people in many, many different ways in every country. So every country seeks to protect.
Yes.
So what I'm keen on is just to begin to look at the Chinese value chain and to find out if at any stage state assistance is involved. Movement of goods on the high seas. We don't have our own, I think we have a few of our own carriers, not enough to carry our own trade. They do. And these are state companies. So those are things really to be looked at critically.
Yes.
Whether there is any kind of arrangement.
Yeah.
Be it as it may, we need to wake up. We need people like my colleague here, our farmers, to begin to provide policy inputs for government to think critically about this. I think that this is not something that the average person had thought about.
Yes.
But let me tell you, they'll bring in whatever. Think of anything that is edible on earth. You find it in the Chinese market, and they can export it.
Yes,
literally,
absolutely. Thank you so much, Honorable Sakwa Bunyasu. We also had Jimmy Kagoni, a political analyst, as well as Stephen Mokesi, who's a public policy analyst, helping us analyze what's making headlines in our local dailies. It's Wednesday, and we like to take a look at the economy, a critical look at the economy, and Jesse Rogers is coming up with his expert panel to help us make heads and tails of the situation with the county governments, what's happening, and why are we still having a county cash crunch. Do stay tuned to Morning Express.